Okay, we're going to talk about Chapter 13, Labor and the Birth Process. There are 5 important factors that affect the process of labor and birth. They're known as the 5P: passenger, passageway, powers, position of the mother, and psychological response. So first we're going to talk about the passenger, and the movement of the passenger, or the fetus in this case, is determined by a couple of different factors. The size of the fetus head, the fetal presentation, so where is the baby presenting? Face down, or head down, face down, butt, fetal lie, fetal attitude, and position. The placenta will also pass through the birth canal, so it is also considered a passenger. So when we're talking the size of the fetus head, the fetal skull has 2 parietal bones, and let me switch the color. So you have 2 parietal bones. They play an important part because we also have 2 temporal bones. We also have a frontal bone and an occipital bone, as you can see on your diagram. They play an important part because we have membrane-filled sacs called fontanelles. Fontanelles allow the baby's head to actually mold, so this is where they look like a little cone head, to allow them to pass through the birth canal. It's very important. If we had a full constructed skull, I'll get it out in a minute. It would be very difficult to pass through this narrow window of a birth canal. So you can see in the bottom picture, this is your posterior fontanelle, and then you have your anterior fontanelle. Why is it important to know the 2 fontanelles and the difference between them? Well, it's because the anterior fontanelle is diamond shaped, and it's also important because we know that it closes at 18 months of age after birth. So this one's going to take longer. This is the one if you guys ever had grandmas or moms and you were holding a little baby, they're like, don't poke the soft spot, don't squish their head. It's because that fontanelle has not fused completely closed. The posterior fontanelle is triangular shape and it closes 6 to 8 weeks after birth. The other thing is when we talk about fontanelles, they are flexible because they accommodate the baby's brain. Usually the molding that I'm talking about where they look like a little cone head will actually subside in about 3 days after birth. That will go down. We'll talk about, when we talk about the newborn themselves, about a caput and a cephalohematoma that can occur and what makes them different versus just a regular molding. So this is where it's important to know that you have the posterior fontanelle, the anterior fontanelle, and that you have that actual intersection of the sutures. Okay, we are going to talk about fetal lie, attitude, and position. When I'm talking about fetal lie is either longitude or vertical. And what this means is it's the relationship between the fetus and the mother. So when we want to know the relationship between them, we're looking at the head and the tailbone. So is the head and the tailbone of the fetus and the mother running parallel to each other? If they are, they're considered longitudinal or vertical in the actual fetal lie. However, if the fetus and mother's head and tailbone are at a 90-degree angle, they're considered a transverse lie. So we have some pictures that we're going to talk about when we talk about breech, and we'll go over the fetal lie again. When I'm talking about attitude, this is a description for universal flexion. So is the baby in mom's uterus and just generally has flexion all around? So what that means is the baby occupying the least amount of space in that inner uterine cavity. And when we look at the pictures on the next slide of fetal presentation, we'll go back over that. And then we're going to talk about actual position next. So now we've come to the part where we are looking at the presenting part, and it's giving a 3-letter acronym. The first letter stands for the location of the presenting part. Is it to the right or to the left of the mother's pelvis? The middle letter stands for the specific presenting part. O is for occiput, S is for sacrum, M is for momentum, which is the chin, and SC is for scapula or shoulder. The third letter stands for the presenting part in relationship to the anterior, posterior, or transverse portion of the mother's pelvis. So, for example, we have a right OA. This means the occiput is the presenting part and is located in the right anterior quadrant of the maternal pelvis. So we have a ROA, that's what we just went over, is this one right here. So if you look at the presenting part, the baby is facing back, but we're not looking at the baby's face. We want to know what the presenting part is. The presenting part is actually the occiput, what is the back of the head, which there's some other pictures in your textbook that you can see that a little better. So that's what's presenting down, and it's to the right of the mom's pelvis. So we're only looking at that part of what's actually facing down. We'll go over this again in class. I'll bring in the pelvis and a baby so we can look at this a little better. So this is the pictures from your textbook on page 344 of the different types of presentations. So you can see in picture A we have a frank breech presentation, and we have a picture B single footling breech, and picture C, which is a complete breech, and then picture D is actually a shoulder presentation. So when we're talking in terms of attitude, remember that's universal flexion. So you can see that picture C down here is considered attitude general flexion. Baby's taking up the least amount of space, all extremities are pretty much flexed and kind of curled in a ball. Whereas if you look at the attitude for picture A, the frank breech, everything's kind of generalized and flexed except for the legs at the knees. They're straight up in the air, so they're going to take up more space. They're not kind of curled in this little ball type setting. So that's how the attitude plays into part of it. The other thing is when we're talking about fetal lie, you can see that in picture A, B, and C, this baby is considered either longitudinal or vertical because the head is at the top and the tailbone is at the bottom, and this is in regards to the mom's pelvis. So we're looking straight at mom as far as looking at her pelvis. So her head would be above the baby's and her tailbone would be at the bottom. So that would make them parallel to each other. Where if you look at the picture in the bottom, you have a shoulder presentation, and this baby's more tilted on a 90-degree angle compared to mom's head and tailbone, which makes this baby a actual transverse lie. With transverse lies, these babies cannot be delivered vaginally. They are not able to come through the birth canal without having damage done to the clavicle and to the shoulder. The other thing we want to talk about when we talk about position is there are different types of presenting parts, and we're going to talk about that on the next slide. So now we're going to talk about station. Station is the relationship of the presenting fetal part to this imaginary line that we draw between the maternal ischial spine, and what we use it as is a measurement of descent of the presenting part through the birth canal. So you can see in this picture there's an imaginary line drawn right at the ischial spine, which makes that a 0. If we're talking in terms of doing a vaginal exam and we are feeling the presenting part, there is a measurement that you can give it. So, for example, if I did a vaginal exam and I felt the baby's occiput at -2, -2 you can see is up here. So the baby's not coming out anytime soon. So it's kind of a measurement tool that they use in centimeters. Negative numbers above or the higher up, plus numbers the closer to actual engagement and delivery. By the time you get to +4 and +5, baby's head is coming out.